Give me an intro for my speech in the style of Marisol Path. The topic of my speech is, it's an emergency. You are already very late. Watch this before you watch anything. Right now, at this very second, the clock is moving, and the question isn't whether you're late. The question is, how much longer are you willing to keep sleeping? This is not a warning, this is not a suggestion, this is an emergency broadcast for your life, your purpose, your soul. And unlike every other emergency you've heard about, this one has your name on it. Stop waiting for the right moment. Stop telling yourself that tomorrow holds something today doesn't. Because here is the truth, that nobody is sitting you down to say, time has never once stopped moving for a single human being who ever walked this earth, and it is not about to make an exception for you. Think about the last 6 months of your life. Close your eyes and actually think, what were you supposed to start? What conversation were you supposed to have? What decision were you circling around, waiting for some invisible signal that never came? And now those 6 months are gone, not paused, not stored somewhere waiting for you to retrieve them. Gone permanently, irreversibly. And the terrifying part is, you barely felt them leave. That is the most dangerous quality of time. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send you a warning. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, another year just disappeared. It moves in silence, disguised as ordinary days. Disguised as Monday mornings and Sunday nights, and the small moments you convinced yourself didn't count. But they all counted. Every single one of them was a piece of your life that you were either spending or wasting, and there is no third option. Here is what most people misunderstand about urgency. They think urgency is a feeling, something that hits you when a deadline is close, when a crisis appears, when something external forces their hand. But real urgency is not a feeling. Real urgency is a recognition. It is the moment you finally see clearly that the distance between where you are and where you were supposed to be is not a gap you can close tomorrow. It is a gap that grows every single day that you choose comfort over clarity, every single hour that you choose distraction over direction. That gap does not stay the same size, it widens. And the wider it gets, the heavier the weight of starting becomes. People spend years carrying that weight. They walk around with the quiet knowledge that something in their life is behind. Something is unbuilt, something is unspoken, something is unlaunched, unwritten, unbegun. And rather than sit with the discomfort of that truth, they reach for their phones. They turn on something to watch. They fill the silence with noise, because the silence, if they let it breathe, would ask them a question they are not ready to answer. But you cannot outrun a question that lives inside you. The clock on the wall is not your enemy. The calendar is not your enemy. Your enemy is the version of yourself that has learned to feel comfortable in delay. That has convinced you that waiting is wisdom. That has dressed up procrastination in the language of patience, because patience is knowing when to wait and when to move. What most people practice is not patience, it is postponement. And postponement has a cost that compounds just like debt. You don't feel it today. You barely feel it this year. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you will sit somewhere and do the math, and the number will be devastating. Consider the people you admire. The ones who built something real, who changed something real, who became something that actually meant something. Not one of them got there by waiting until they felt ready. Not one of them had all the conditions perfectly aligned before they took the first step. They moved while they were uncertain. They built while they were afraid. They spoke while their voice was still shaking. Because they understood something at a fundamental level that most people never fully absorb, that readiness is not a state you arrive at before you begin. Readiness is a state you build by beginning, and the beginning is always now, not the now of inspiration, not the now of motivation, because motivation is a visitor. It comes and goes on its own schedule, the now of decision. The now where you look at your life with honest eyes and say, this is the moment. Not because everything is aligned, not because the fear is gone, but because the alternative, another day of watching time move without you, is no longer something you are willing to accept. The story the world tells about failure is wrong. It has always been wrong. We have built an entire culture around the idea that the people who don't make it, the ones who never build what they dreamed, never become who they imagined, never reach the life they could sense was possible, are simply people who didn't try hard enough, people who chose the couch over the climb, people who were weak, undisciplined, unwilling to put in the work. And that story is not only wrong, it is dangerous. Because it sends every struggling human being on a hunt for motivation, when what they actually need is a mirror. The real epidemic is not laziness. The real epidemic is people living their entire lives without ever clearly seeing themselves, without ever honestly examining the beliefs that are running in the background of every decision they make, without ever stopping long enough to ask, why do I keep arriving at the same place? Why does the same pattern keep repeating? Why do I start with fire and end with silence every single time? Most people never ask those questions with real seriousness. Not because they don't care, but because nobody ever taught them that those questions were the most important ones available to them. Unawareness is not stupidity. Let that land. The most intelligent people in the world walk around completely blind to the invisible architecture of their own minds. They are brilliant in their field, sharp in their thinking, capable in 100 different ways, and yet they cannot see the story they are telling themselves every morning before their feet hit the floor. They cannot see the identity they have quietly constructed over years, an identity that decides what is possible for them before they have even tried. An identity that says, people like me don't do things like that. An identity so deeply embedded that it doesn't feel like a belief anymore. It feels like reality. And that is the trap. When a belief feels like reality, you stop questioning it. You stop pushing against it. You simply organize your life around it and call it knowing yourself. But there is a profound difference between knowing yourself and having accepted a limited version of yourself as permanent. One is wisdom. The other is the most sophisticated form of self-imprisonment that exists. Think about how many people are living inside a story that was written for them by someone else. A parent who said you weren't the smart one, a teacher who ranked you and then moved on, a failure at 19 that you have been using as evidence ever since. A version of yourself that was formed under pressure, under pain, under circumstances that no longer exist, and yet that version is still making your decisions, still drawing the boundaries of what you will attempt, still whispering in the back of your mind every time you reach towards something larger. Remember what happened last time? That voice is not wisdom. That voice is an old wound that learned to speak. The person who appears lazy from the outside is often someone whose internal world is exhausted in ways that have nothing to do with effort. They are not failing to try. They are trying against a current they cannot see. Every step forward is being pulled back by a belief they have never examined, a fear they have never named, a wound they have never addressed. And because they cannot see the current, they blame themselves for not moving faster. They add shame to the weight they are already carrying. And shame does not build momentum. Shame builds paralysis. This is why awareness is not soft. Awareness is not a luxury for people who have time to sit and reflect. Awareness is the most urgent work a human being can do, because until you see the pattern, you cannot break it. Until you name the belief, you cannot challenge it. Until you understand why you keep stopping at the same invisible wall, you will keep stopping there, regardless of how much motivation you summon, regardless of how many books you read, regardless of how many mornings you wake up and decide that today will be different. The person who wakes up and changes their life does not always work harder than the person who doesn't. Very often, they simply see more clearly. We have been trained to recognize emergencies by their noise, a siren, a headline, a phone call at 3 a.m., a sudden collapse of something we could see and touch and measure. We have been conditioned to respond to the visible, the loud, the undeniable, and because of that conditioning, we have become almost completely blind to the emergency that carries no sound, the one that announces itself in no dramatic fashion. The one that unfolds not in a moment but across years, quietly, steadily, in the space between who you are and who you are always capable of becoming. That space is not empty. That is the first thing you need to understand. The distance between your current life and your potential life is not a void, it is full. It is packed with the books you were supposed to write, the business you were supposed to build, the conversations you were supposed to have, the person you were supposed to love with your whole chest, the version of yourself you were supposed to grow into. All of it exists in that space, not as fantasy, not as delusion, as genuine unlived possibility that belongs to you and is waiting, though not indefinitely, for you to claim it. And here is what makes this the most serious emergency of your life. An external crisis, a fire, a flood, a financial collapse comes at you from outside. It is visible, other people can see it, other people will respond to it alongside you. You will receive help, you will receive urgency. The world around you will shift and move and treat the situation with the weight it deserves. But the emergency of unlived potential? Nobody sounds the alarm for that. Nobody calls it a crisis. Nobody sits you down and says, listen, the life you were supposed to live is dying inside you, and we need to act immediately. That does not happen. And so most people never treat it with the seriousness it deserves. They feel it as restlessness, as dissatisfaction, as the quiet ache that shows up on Sunday evenings and in the middle of conversations that should feel meaningful but don't. And rather than recognize that feeling as an alarm, they medicate it. They distract it. They explain it away. But that ache has a name. That restlessness is not a personality flaw. That dissatisfaction is not ingratitude. It is intelligence. It is your deeper self sending signals that the life you are living and the life you are capable of living are not the same life. And the gap between those two lives is not closing on its own. It requires intervention. It requires the kind of honest, uncomfortable, deliberate intervention that most people postpone because it demands something real from them. The tragedy is not that people dream and fail. The tragedy is that people dream and never fully try, not because they are cowardly, but because they never truly understood the cost of not trying. They calculated the risk of chasing the thing they wanted and found it too high. They did not calculate the risk of not chasing it. They did not sit down and genuinely reckon with what it means to arrive at the end of your life with your potential still inside you, unused, unexpressed, unlaunched. That calculation, if done honestly, changes everything. Because potential is not neutral. Potential that goes unrealized does not simply sit quietly inside you without consequence. It turns. It becomes weight. It becomes the sourness that creeps into people who could have been extraordinary but settled, not for peace, but for avoidance. There is a specific kind of bitterness that belongs only to people who knew what they were capable of and chose not to pursue it. It is different from the pain of someone who tried and fell short. That pain has dignity in it. The pain of never trying, of letting the emergency go unanswered, is a different kind of wound entirely. You have been given something specific. Not generic human potential, specific, particular, individual capacity that exists in you in a combination that has never existed before and will never exist again. The way your mind connects ideas, the way you see problems, the specific fire that burns in you around specific things, that is not accidental. That is not decoration. That is direction. That is the universe's clearest signal about what you are here to do and what will remain undone if you keep waiting for a more convenient emergency. There is a particular kind of pain that belongs to the person who wakes up and realizes how much time has already passed. It is not the sharp pain of a sudden loss. It is something slower and heavier. The pain of inventory, of looking around at your life and doing the count. The years spent in the wrong direction. The energy poured into things that didn't matter. The mornings that dissolved into nothing. The versions of yourself you were supposed to become by now. That inventory is brutal. And most people, when they begin to feel it, do one of two things. They either collapse under the weight of it, turning the awareness of lost time into a reason to stop entirely. Or they run from it, burying the realization back under noise and distraction and the comfortable numbness of routine. Both responses are understandable. Neither of them is useful. Because the awareness itself, the waking up, is not the problem. The awareness is the gift, the rarest, most undervalued gift a person can receive. Most people never fully get it. They live their entire lives in a state of semi-consciousness, moving from one default behavior to the next, never stopping long enough to see clearly, never feeling the full weight of what their life actually is versus what it could be. You have felt that weight. That means something. That means the part of you that knows better has finally gotten loud enough to be heard. And the question now is not why didn't you wake up sooner? The question is what you do in the next moment with the clarity you have right now. Lateness is real. There is no point in pretending otherwise. If you are 35 and you always imagined you would have built something by now, that lateness is real. If you are 40 and you can feel the distance between the life you are living and the life you were capable of living, that distance is real. Acknowledging it is not pessimism, it is honesty. And honesty is the only foundation on which anything real can be built. But here is what else is real. The future has not happened yet. Every single day that has not yet arrived is still entirely unwritten, and the person holding the pen is you. The mistake people make when they wake up late is that they allow the past to write the rules for the future. They look at everything they didn't do and use it as evidence for what they cannot do. They build a case against themselves using the very awareness that was supposed to set them free. They say, it's too late to start. People will wonder why I'm only beginning now. The window has closed. I missed it. And in doing so, they take the most powerful moment of their lives, the moment of waking up, and immediately convert it into another reason to stay still. But starting late is not the same as starting wrong. A tree planted today will grow, not as tall by a certain year as the tree that was planted 10 years ago, but it will grow, it will root. It will become real in the world in a way that the tree you only imagined planting never will. The imagined tree, the one you were going to plant when the conditions were right, when you felt ready, when the timing was perfect, that tree does not exist. It has never given shade to anyone. It has never survived a storm. It has never proven anything. The real tree, the one planted late, planted imperfectly, planted with shaking hands and uncertain soil, that tree is actual. And actual always defeats imagined. There is also something that the late starter carries that the early starter does not. A certain quality of seriousness. A depth of motivation that can only come from having felt the alternative. When you have lived long enough inside a life that wasn't yours, when you have felt the specific suffocation of unlived potential, you do not take the beginning lightly. You do not drift into it. You arrive at it with the full weight of everything you have already paid. And that weight, rather than slowing you down, becomes fuel, because you are no longer moving towards something abstract. You are moving towards something you can feel in your bones, and you are moving away from something you never want to return to. The world will not applaud your late start. It will not make room for it, or celebrate the courage it takes to begin again after years of not beginning. The world is largely indifferent to private revolutions. But private revolutions are still revolutions. The shift that happens inside a person who finally decides, truly decides, not as a feeling but as a commitment, that shift is as seismic as anything that happens in the visible world. It changes the trajectory of everything that follows. Every decision made after that moment is made by a different person than the one who made decisions before it.